Back in 2019, FromSoftware made one of the greatest combat systems of all time. This was before Elden Ring, before the new Armored Core, and the game fell into obscurity. Now, this system was the basis for the game Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. In the game, you play as the Wolf, a shinobi bound to protect a young lord who's the descendant of an ancient bloodline. This young lord's become the target of many vicious enemies due to his ties to immortality. Now, we explore late 1500s Sengoku Japan, and it's a brutal period, one with not too many games tied to it. In typical FromSoft fashion, we explore and battle our way through a variety of areas with mooks all around and big bosses, with the setting playing a key role into what we encounter. Besides dudes in armour, there's some wild cards as they lean heavily on the mythology tied to the time, something rarely explored in the West, and it gives us a really interesting narrative and story. Let's get into it. As a shinobi, you're not a dude in heavy armour, and combat reflects this, being a lethal dance of sword swinging. Most, if not all combat, falls down to this 1000 cuts type style where you're both dealing direct health damage to the enemy, but also attacking their poise by blocking and parrying, hoping to open up their guard for an instant death blow, and it's slightly different to the other games. While you don't have the strength of a big dude, you have the advantage of stealth and skill, and it's something I've not really seen elsewhere. Something that came close to me was Star Wars Fallen Order, with a similar attacking the enemy's poise system. It feels like a mashup between a usual FromSoft title and almost a rhythm beat game. You have a variety of tools but only one main weapon, and the player's skill is the big determining factor on how combat goes. This does put some people off, but it's a really rewarding type of game. There's a whole host of enemies too, and even some creatures and supernatural type battles. Your overall speed's your advantage, and you have a variety of shinobi tools that can help you give an edge against different opponents and their fighting styles. Besides attacking and parrying, you also have a whole host of learned fighting styles that can help you counter specific moves in unique ways. You can step on spear thrust, jump on an enemy's head if they go to sweep you, that sort of thing. When you're not in combat, you're exploring a variety of areas with the advantage of platforming, stealth, and a grappling hook, giving you a lot of options in most cases on how you want to approach. You get the fast travel from the beginning too, so there's not a lot of backtracking, even though you do revisit quite a lot of areas for sort of story relevance. They do make the good habit of changing these areas up, adding in new enemies, changing a bit of the layout, and I think it's really well done. Alongside this, the leveling system's quite unique. Now, you do get XP that can go into skill points that help you learn unique techniques or slight boosts to your healing and those sort of things. But your health and your attack damage is all tied to your progress through the game and your own skill. So you can't really grind through any of these areas, it's just learning how to play the game. It's really good. The setting, as touched on before, is 1500 Sengoku Japan, and a lot of the game design's reflecting this. Combat's fast and lethal, enemies block with their swords instead of big shields, and when you come up against things like shields, you end up needing other ways around them. There's one Western Knight boss that you see, which is an inverse of the usual FromSoftware, playing a knight and coming up against a samurai invader. The knight in this case is covered in plate armor, and you end up having to work around the fact you just can't pierce it with your katana. There's heavy dips into more mythological and Japanese supernatural with the divine realms, Buddha, and themes of fate, immortality, and the spiritual world being overlapped with our own. It's something that by design had me invested because, again, I've not really seen a lot of these concepts showcased before, and we've not had a whole lot of that in the gaming sphere. Black Myth Wukong came out recently, and that's the only game I can think of to mind that sort of popularised that area of mythology. In terms of graphics and music, the game's really cool. The graphics take a back seat in terms of realism, and some might argue they've made that cut to focus on the gameplay and other design areas more. The mood and general aesthetics of the game are very cool, and I never found the graphics off-putting despite them looking a few years old for the time. It's a case of the sum of the whole being better than its individual parts. The sound design's definitely at the forefront here, and the use of audio cues as a gameplay element is just being used full throttle. You hear the swords smash when your parries connect, that sounds different to a typical block. When an enemy's charging an attack or about to lunge, you hear it all coming for you. There's even more minute details like hearing swords leave scabbards when an enemy's about to attack and that sort of thing. The music itself, while not too detailed, does work for the setting and whatever mood they're trying to accomplish. If I'm against something spooky, the game kind of tells me. If it's a climactic fight, the music also suits. And they've made the best of an average bunch here. I think the overall feel of the game is very unique to Sekiro, and the use of cutscenes too is also quite impactful. In some areas, they highlight some of the more basic textures and models, but they do add enough fluff in the SFX to make the cutscenes look really good. The story was a big highlight to me for this game, with its use of the Divine Realms and even accessing memories as a form of pseudo-time travel. The whole thing can get a bit complicated if you're not paying attention. It's not as bad as some of the older Souls titles, you're not trawling through item descriptions, but there's a lot of loose threads that can be left on a casual playthrough. There's 4 endings in the game, each accessed at different points in the story or through some slightly obscure methods, so in terms of accessibility, the story can be a tough nut to crack for some players. For the sake of the video, I'm going to be playing through the Purification ending, as this shows sort of the most content. I'm leaving the true ending for you, the viewer, to go and find yourself, along with the other 2 endings you can get to earlier in the game. I'm going to provide some speculation on what I saw in terms of loose ends and some of the plot points and NPCs, and expect spoilers from this point on. I'll timestamp appropriately in the description. Enjoy. The game opens up telling us it's in Sengoku era Japan, in the war-torn land of Ashina. It's not openly clear what the hostilities are about, but it seems the war might be coming to a close as the cutscene draws on. We watch an unknown General Tamura be killed by a master swordsman, Ishin Ashina, and it brings the war to a close. A rogue shinobi walks across the battlefield and finds a stray child, taking him under his wing. He calls him Starving Wolf, but we'll know him as our protagonist Sekiro. We're told one important bit of info in this prologue, the Shinobi Code. The father's word is absolute, and then the word of the master. We're given a little lord to look after, and it skips to 20 years later. Ashina's now on the brink of collapse, and Sekiro's nearly lost everything, both his father and his little lord. While we're sulking in a cracked well, a lady drops a message down to us, telling us it will help us find our little lord. From there, the game begins proper, weirdly reminding me of the opening to Dark Souls 1 with us in a small cramped room and a character dropping a key item down to us. The message basically says our master's being kept at Moonview Tower. From there, the rest is up to us. Now we awake without any weapons, again similar to the opening of DS1, but this serves as a tutorial to moving around and stealth gameplay. We can hug walls, hang on ledges, and hide in tall grass. There's an element of parkour that's not really seen in the other games. And we can eavesdrop on people. So we eavesdrop on some soldiers who'd abandoned their hunt for Sekiro because they saw him depressed and thought he was just on his way out anyway. He's not a threat. We make our way to Moonview Tower. When we get there, we see our little lord. He's called Kuro, and he forgives us for our absence. He grants us our sword, and we re-swear our oath to him. We're also given a healing gourd, which is functionally similar to Estus or the Crimson Tears if you hit Elden Ring first. With our sword, we're able to start our mission to get our lord to safety, and part of that is clearing a way to a secret passage so we can get out. Our first bit of combat includes stealth kills from behind, and also breaking a second opponent's posture meter for a death blow. It's quite simple stuff for the intro, but there's enemies and bosses later with which you can kill them entirely by deflecting their attacks, and draining their posture meter without really having to throw any other attacks of your own. One of the mini-bosses showcases this as they act as our last barrier to freedom. I really do love the combat in this game, I can't glaze it enough. It's something unique and really enjoyable. From there, we work our way to the secret passage out, and we whistle for Lord Kuro, and things get a little bit spicier. As we leave, we encounter Genichiro Ashina, a descendant of the Master Swordsman in the intro cutscene, who wants to stop us sneaking away with the young lord. I'll let you see some highlights from the combat just to see what sort of crack they throw at us as our first major boss. It's really fast twitch, and you're meant to die to him, but if you're good enough, you can feasibly beat him at this point. The result is always the same, however. Sekiro's arm is cut off, the divine heir Kuro is stolen away, and we awaken days later with a prosthetic arm and a woodcarver who's dragged us out of the battlefield. Not much is known yet about the sculptor, besides that he carves Buddhas, and they all have a wrathful image. You can never carve a peaceful one. He tells us our master lives and that they're at Ashina Castle. If we ask him further about the divine heir, he tells us that his divine blood is probably what resurrected us. Just like that, we're left to go and explore. There's one other character at the sculptor's place, Hanbei the Undying, and we'll get to him later. There's only one way out, and it relies on us using our new prosthetic arm. It's a shinobi's best friend, and it comes preloaded with a grappling hook. Something quite cool is that when we enter the first real area, we get to see this huge panoramic of where we're headed, and it looks quite pretty. It's good level design. We skirt through, making light work of the Ashina forces here using stealth and a tiny bit of swordsmanship as we advance. We find an old lady looking for her lost son, and she gives us a bell charm to offer to the Buddha. Her son's actually close by and dying, and he asks us to look after her as we head onward. We'll deal with the bell charm a little bit later. For the sake of plot coherence, we're after the divine heir first. Advancing further through the outskirts of the Ashina land, we encounter our first real barrier for new players, the Chained Ogre. Now he's a huge lump of a man, driven mad as we can see by his red eyes. If we had the flame vent tool here, we could actually frighten him, but in my mad dash to get to the Lord, I've forgone using the bell to get that, so we're just going to have to fight him, raw dog style. If you parry his attacks and just keep up the aggression, you can wear him down without any external tools. The big thing is to actually run away from his grab attacks or he'll two-hit you with them. Just bide your time and get your licks in. If, however, you die, you hear the divine heir speak to us. In Sekiro, there's a resurrection system where if we die mid-combat, we can come back with a chance to carry on. Now this has its own cooldown, and abusive immortality comes with its own downsides, but for now we can use this power to get past the ogre. With him down, we can skulk past more Ashina men to find the bridge to the castle has been taken out. With that in mind, we have to take a scenic route through the mountains using our grappling hook. We're not alone in this mountain pass though, as some of the wildlife comes to play. Not much is fed to us about the serpent, besides its inherent danger, and an item description later on describes it as a god of the land. And well, with its divine stature, I'm quite happy to believe that. With the snake dealt with, we head on through, sneaking towards what appears to be a great clearing, and our first real boss outside of the ogre. Gyobu Masataka Oniwa, Guardian of the Gate. In the lore, Gyobu is a bandit leader whose troop were taken in by Isshin Ashina after a defeat. Going on to become one of his grandson's most trusted retainers, he wields a spear and comes at us with his armoured horse. His poise recovery is actually quite low, and so one of the best ways of dealing with him is just to parry and get licks in when it's really safe. If you die and resurrect, he actually comments on this. In fact, a lot of enemies do, and I love that aspect of the bosses. They feel alive, and the whole die and try again thing's built into the world. Immortality is possible, and we have it. If we choose to turn around rather than advancing to the gate, we meet one of the Tengu of Ashina, possibly one of the dudes who carried Kuro away in that opening cutscene. He wants us to deal with rats, assassins from Senpo Temple that have been skulking around Ashina land. One of the fun bits about the lore is, while we're trying to invade Ashina's castle, we're not the only enemies the clan has. Instead of pressing onto the castle, I choose to double back and see what that Buddha bell was, all about. We meet Emma the physician, who can improve our healing flask and is a bit wishy-washy on who she actually works for. The sculptor gives us a shinobi-specific esoteric text, hinting at his past as a shinobi warrior, and this allows us to unlock unique shinobi skills. We unlock a few extra tools, such as the shuriken, and then we place the bell down, praying to hear the bell speak to us. We've somehow entered an old memory. It's almost a limited form of time travel, but the NPCs around us do confirm we're back 3 years previous at Hirata Estate, where Lord Kuro was first kidnapped, and at a time not too long before our prologue. It's not entirely clear why we're sent back here, but for whatever reason, we can take things from this time back to the present with us. Now, the Hirata Estate is under attack by Ashina men attempting to kidnap the Divine Heir. Maybe we can fight our way to the Lord's chambers and figure out what's going on. There's a few things we can do en route here, including picking up an action shinobi tool, good against shields and those rat assassins, a flame vent for those with madness or just giant creatures in general. And we could actually cross paths with an NPC who we may have already seen in the present, one of the merchants in the outskirts of Ashina Estate. He's trying to loot the place, but talking to him in the present confirms that he has seen us before. Fight through the Hirata Estate, and the place is a lot more lethal than other areas so far, with spear-wielding lieutenants, torchbearers, and just a massive onslaught of Ashina soldiers. When we eventually do make it to the estate, the place is a total mess. It's lit on fire and we can meet our master Owl. He gives us a key to the Lord's chambers and tasks us with finding him, reminding us of the Iron Code. It seems he's in a bit of a pickle, but he'll be fine tending to his own wounds, I promise. We do some more stealth work and we advance into the estate proper. Something I found weird was the presence of all the sculptor's idols, like even in the past. I get they're just bonfires, but perhaps the man had followed a similar path to our own. Regardless, to actually get into the estate's main building, we have to deal with Juzo the Drunkard and his crew of soldiers. He's actually the leader of the bandits attacking the place, and he can be a bit of a monster to deal with. Now in the lore, he's actually a famed sumo wrestler, and both his size, stance, and some of his attacks reflect this. He's a big boy, and we don't want him getting his hands on us. With enough perseverance, he goes down, and we can enter the main building. There's even a little secret passage we can take for more loot if you've got a keen eye. From there, we can enter into the hidden temple underneath the place, and we're warned that whoever's trying to kidnap the Lord has some sort of illusion powers.
Ashina, フクロウのせがれよ。お嬢殿、言ってください。そなたはなすべきことをなすのです。わかりました。さて、やろうか、せがれ殿。
Lady Butterfly was a hard fight when I first played the game, and in the lore she was actually one of Sekiro's mentors, so I could see why. Since my first time playing, I'd finished the game twice, I did Sekiro Resurrected, and I've learned a lot. Parrying and finding a rhythm is your best bet with her. You could use shurikens to knock her out the air mid-fight, and when she sweeps you, just jump on her head. If you follow those little free tidbits, you'll take her down before she even gets a chance to use her illusion powers. With her dead, we find a Sakura droplet and get to see a cutscene of our last memory of this place, when Kuro got kidnapped.
ためそなたは戦ってくれた。捨ておくことなどできるものか。狼よ、我が血と共に生きてくれ。
The big sword seems very suspiciously like the one Owl's using, but we'll get back to that. Kuro uses his divine blood to resurrect us, and we see where our immortality stems from. There's many parts of this game where prayer or internal recollection seem to give us an advantage, and just from a mythology perspective, it's very Buddhist in nature. It's a very cool twist and made for a very cool game. And with the past settled, we can head to the actual Ashina castle. The Tengu man told us to deal with the rats in the castle for a reward, and the axe is the perfect tool for that, as you can see here. The rats are actually just dumpy, fat tumor men, and if you slap these little dudes down, we can head back to get our reward, the Ashina esoteric text. With this we can learn, you guessed it, the Ashina skill tree. It's based off of Ishin's previous experience, and you can actually see the moves in some of his followers and his grandson. It's quite neat stuff. Speaking of the man, we head up the hill and continue our efforts breaking into his castle. Not much of note really comes up until we reach the front gate. And the ball did take me by surprise. I really wasn't expecting it, and it can be a bit of a hassle to deal with. There's not much lore on this one, but allegedly in history it was a common tactic to strap torches to the heads of bulls and send them at the enemy in some skirmishes around that time and area. With the ball down, we can find our way to the castle, and there's actually multiple ways in and out here, but I chose to take the rooftops to the top of the castle, the old Assassin's Creed route. The roofs are actually littered with other Tengu, and these guys are full of surprises. We find the one open window in the place and then skulk up towards the roof. We get into a fight with one of the elite warriors of the Ashina style, and most of his attacks are ones we can learn through that skill book we just got. It's pretty neat. Furthermore, if we study one of the scriptures in the room, we can learn a technique for grabbing lightning thrown at us and countering it. After him, it's best we reach the tippity top of the castle and things get serious.
おじい様のご様子はどうだ。
一心様は命を保っておられるのが不思議なほどです。
そうか。巫女よ、もう一度言う。不死のちぎりを俺と結べ。できませぬ、源一郎殿。たとえひとたび敗れるとも、命を落とし、主を必ず取り戻す。それが我が忍びなれば。お迎えに参上いたしました。今しばらくお待ちくだされ。なるほどな。貴様を殺しきらぬ限り、流印を我が手にはできぬ。
Ashina is not too dissimilar to his fight in the intro, and with enough practice he's a fairly easy fight, though a bit of a barrier to some new players. When you think you're done after his 2 health bars, he then gives us some spiel about switching sides. He has a secret third phase where he makes use of the lightning of Tomoe, and of course that even isn't enough against us. We finally get our revenge for the intro and then it's all sorted, right? Game over?
Ashina はこの国は俺のすべてだ。そのためなら俺は人間をやめよう。死人帰りか。
See you around.
Turns out, Genichiro has abandoned all reason, including his own humanity in pursuit of a power to defend his land. He has a form of resurrection different to ours, brought on by the healing waters of the land. He's really after our resurrection, as the water does tend to drive people crazy. It's not sustainable, but I suppose he'll get what he could take. Well, it turns out Genichiro is actually an adoptive grandson to the soulslike Ishin taken in after his mother's death. He's using heretical techniques like the lightning we saw in some desperate plea to save his country, so he's not actually a full bad guy, I don't think, just on the other side of the fence to us. With him down, we could speak to Emma again and the Little Lord. Now, so far this game has been semi-linear, with the fights either being an exercise in evasion or who can be more aggressive, and I really do enjoy this game, from the combat to the tiny dribbles of world building. The characters are okay, but nothing really to write home about. But let's go speak to the Little Lord. Kuro praises us for coming, and we suggest fleeing. He says that all this immortality business leads to stagnation, and that rather than fleeing, we need to assist him in severing his immortality. You know, the one his blood gives. And normal weapons don't work on him, so we can't just chop him up. That was pretty dark, actually. Our starting point is a text on immortal severance that tells us of the right of immortal severance. We need to locate a sanctuary beyond Fountainhead Palace, and the Little Lord must drink the tears of a divine dragon. Two things we've no clue on, how to even start finding them. Turns out another divine heir, Lord Takaru, used an incense burner found in the palace to enter the divine realm, so that at least gives us a starting point. From this point, the game splits into 3 paths, finding 2 ingredients for the incense burner and finding the mortal blade. We meet Ishin and he tells us about this mortal blade. It could kill the immortal, and we'll be encountering a couple of those blocking our path later on. A lot of the in-game hints revolve around this former divine heir, Lord Takaru, and his journey to reach the divine realm. We're after 3 items, but only 2 are accessible at this point, a rock and a flower. One's hidden deep in a place called Mibu Village, and the other's essentially at the bottom of the world, where the divine waters of rejuvenation converge. You can do any of this in any real order, but you'll want to get the mortal blade before going for the flower. That's the only stipulation. There's 3 routes out of the castle, out the back, down the passage we started in the introduction, or through the dungeons. Each leads you to one of our objectives, so don't worry too much about getting lost. If you keep pushing forward, you'll get where you need to go. So I'm going to split the video up around these beats. The run up to Ashina Castle was definitely awesome and set a lot of tone to the game, and it's a good foundation to get you hooked, but let's get into the meat of it.
Hello everyone, I am Will Keith, and today I am doing my largest cut ever that I advertised a couple months ago.
Now, the Mortal Blade is on Senpo Temple, above Mount Kongo. Senpo Temple is full of these monks that have strayed from the path of Buddha. You have to go through the castle dungeons to get there, and we're introduced to some of the more creepier elements with locust and infested peasants. There's actually a doctor down here studying immortality, and we can send some NPCs to their doom at his hands. Sekiro is actually quite good at conveying horror, probably down to how spooky some of the supernatural elements can be. Scuttle through to the temple and we can see another bit of the supernatural. A divine something or other speaks to us when we enter. It actually warns us away, and if we enter it says it starts praying for us. It's slightly reminiscent of the old Yharnam entrance in Bloodborne. Senpo Temple is a very pretty mountain forest area. The monks inside have lost their pious nature and are all corrupted by otherworldly forces. The temple itself had a problem with seeking immortality, and they experimented with the rejuvenating waters we've seen resurrect Ashina in our previous boss fight. The waters by nature turn people to madness, and the monks have kidnapped many in their experiments. Grappling around the mountains, we can find our way to a bridge with an armoured knight looking for one of these kidnapped people, his own son. He's unique in the way that he only has one health bar, but our sword can't pierce his armour at all. We essentially have to knock his poise to the point we can knock him off the edge of the bridge. There's various bits of inference we can make about the man, from his armour looking Portuguese, possibly making him a Nanban or southern barbarian.
See you around.
He's looking for his son Robert, who in an item text later tells us he was selling his fireworks in an attempt to fund their voyage to Japan, in search for immortality and extending his life. We've just beaten a man who was looking for his dying son, and probably got by the monks at the temple. It's sad times. The fight could also be an homage to the story of Benkai, a warrior whose story featured a fight against a man in armour on a bridge who was collecting the swords of samurai, but, that might be a bit of a stretch. Regardless, he's our only real blocker here to get to the temple proper. We can find an esoteric text that gives us access to some of the monks' attacks, but really we're here for the blade. Inside the temple there's a bell we can ring and pray at, which can temporarily take us to some sort of divine place. The blade's held somewhere in this realm, and there's 4 monkeys that are blocking us here. It's an homage to the see no, speak no, hear no, do no evil, and each monkey has different senses and behaviour patterns. It's essentially a big gimmick fight, and I never really understood the best way to deal with them, besides brute forcing around and just chasing them down. When you beat them, the divine voice from earlier speaks to us, telling us they were keeping others from finding them. If we close our eyes, we can meet them in their inner sanctum, and the fight is ass, but the character after is pretty cool. The inner sanctum contains the mortal blade, something that could sever immortality but will also kill you if you try to draw it. Luckily, we can resurrect, so it's not a huge problem. The girl guarding the blade is a divine child made with the monk's research into immortality, and her motivations are unclear, so is her alignment really, but she does seem to be quite good. The secret to the true ending is actually interacting with her and doing her questline. That's all you're going to get from me on that. Next up, we have the flower and the rock. Senpo Temple was really cool to traverse and see all the warp monks and the twisted version of a holy place, but that boss was a bit ass. Anyway, moving on.
The flower we're looking for grows where the waters of rejuvenation pool, at the bottom of all the waterfalls in the realm. Basically, we're trying to head deep and down. At any point, if you could go back to the castle, you can eavesdrop on the Little Lord and Emma for hints, so if you're a little bit stuck, I'd recommend doing that. But we want to head back out of the castle, down the back, and essentially start climbing down the mountains. In the Sunken Valley, we have the most horrid enemies. Everyone down here wields guns, and while you can parry bullets, it does get old quick, and it doesn't really affect their poise meter at all. I'd suggest getting through here as fast as you can. The people we're running past are the Snake Eyes. They're an elite force of women who played some unknown role in the previous war. They're rough, they're really, really rough. We actually enter their fort through the top entrance, and have to fight Shirafuji, their leader. She's technically a mini-boss, but honestly, she can be a real rough fight. She's got this awful grab attack that you can jump over if you're lucky, but I felt the hitboxes were a bit wonky on this one. Don't expect to parry your way through this fight, given that her attacks are mostly ranged. When we get past her, we instantly pull aggro on all the women guarding the bottom entrance, and snipers tend to beat katanas. I can safely say I never really enjoyed the gun fort section, though it was cool to run through a large mountainside with very good use of negative space to make the place feel huge. If you blast through the back of the fort, it's guarded by a centipede warrior. Now the name's given by his obvious centipede-like appearance. Not much is actually in the lore about this dude, but his fight is quite a good parry rush. It shouldn't give you too much trouble, and if you can get into the rhythm, it's really great. If you run out the back, you get ambushed by our friend from earlier, and you're meant to drop into the water and have this fun little stealth section. You can get really unlucky like I did though, and just miss this entirely. I actually came back around through Senpo Temple using some shinobi arts and decided to just get rid of the snake entirely. From there, after killing a god of the land, you can progress as normal without any stealth needed, but this isn't necessary. You can just do the stealth section. We then go through some caverns around the mountain, leading us to where the pools collect. This area is surrounded by these cool statues and weirdly a load of monkeys. The run up to the flower is okay, but definitely a step down from Senpo and previous areas. The actual creature tending to the flower is the Guardian Ape, a giant monkey who can take a bit of getting used to. And the fun part about this fight is the game doesn't pull any punches. You're not deflecting these elegant sword blows. These are massive swings from King Kong. We're just successfully blocking, and that's about it. It feels heavy. You have to be very wary that you're fighting something huge and powerful, and when you finally manage to take the monkey out, it has a little surprise in store for us. Turns out the rejuvenating waters have infested the monkey, giving it a form of immortality similar to our friend Genichiro that we fought earlier. It fights with this weirdly puppet-like stance. Something else is controlling its body, and if you get caught when it's screaming, you'll take terror damage, so it's best to run when it starts lifting its head. When you kill it a second time, you pull out a centipede, and this is a symbol of the infestation that we've been seeing, all around Senpo Temple with the monks that were experimenting with the rejuvenating waters. And the flower in the cave's not too far from where we killed the Guardian Ape. You can actually do the rock first, and I recommend that, as the ape leaves us a nasty surprise en route. But for now, it's time to get the rock.
It's not just a boulder! It's a rock! A rock!
Now there's plenty of side content around Ashina Castle that we can access, but for now we need to find the rock. It's hidden in a place called Mibu Village. To get there, head to the dungeon you started the game in, the one where we woke up really sad. There's a man named Jinzaemon here who's hearing some very strange siren song, and he'll be joining us in Mibu Village. In the dungeon itself is a shinobi hunter, clearly seeking out Sekiro, but not knowing what he looks like. If you try to walk past, he clocks our identity, and he uses his sword alongside a series of taekwondo-style kicks. You can use one of your shinobi brand techniques to actually counter this in the same way you would a spear strike, and it always felt really satisfying doing this. If you beat him and head further into the abandoned dungeon, we get to see some more supernatural elements. Or if you die, you can actually go on top of the dungeon and hit him with a stealth attack from above. But regardless, when you deal with him, head on through and you get to see some more supernatural bits. You can go down there, but I'm not going to in this video. If you try and fight anything that looks remotely ghosty, just have some divine confetti on you. That's my one tip. But yeah, the whole rock quest itself's fairly supernatural, as we'll see advancing forward. To start with, an old crone tells us to jump into a dark pit, and from there we can advance into the depths of Ashina. Going through the pit, you'll encounter Ashina Depths, and this is this game's poison swamp. It's full of the snake-eyed gunwomen, and it's so much fun, like riding a bike without a seat, or one of Diddy's parties. It's super fun. Plow through, get a second Snake-Eye Commander fight, and then the real fun actually begins. Now if we came through here first, we'd be in Mibu Village by now, but because we took so long, we get to see another Guardian Ape. This time the head's already popped off, so if you get it to half health, it's got a new surprise. It brings its mate to come and play. You get a substantially weaker double ape fight, but still a double fight of a boss we did earlier. I'd honestly always recommend just going for the rock first and skipping this fight entirely, but scaling in this game is dictated by how many bosses you've killed rather than currency. So, at least it's an advancement. With the second ape gone, we can head to Mibu Village. We actually have to go through a misty swamp, and again, because we came here second instead of doing the rock first, it's later in the evening. We're pounced on by these ghost versions of the Tengu warriors, and you can confirm this by using a snapping seed to remove the illusions, and they still remain. They're not illusions, they're just spooky. If we head through the misty woods and sneak into a temple in the centre, we can see that someone has successfully achieved some temporary form of divine immortality, the Mist Noble, and the game starts to feel quite Bloodborne as we slap his tentacled ass. Mibu Village is full of Yharnam knockoffs, cursed with eternal thirst and a fear of fire from drinking the waters of the river, becoming corrupted by what lives here. They were initially tricked by Mr. Mistnoble into doing this, and if we blast through the village, we also get to see the siren that our boy Jinzaemon heard all the way from the dungeon. Orin of the Water is a full ghost with the ability to become incorporeal, and it's a really rough fight because of that. Like, sometimes your sword hits, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes you can block, sometimes you can't. She seems to be looking for a lost lover and luring men to their death trying to fill that spot, and you can run past her. If you do, we can get to the end of Mibu Village and we're faced with the illusion of a corrupted monk, the guardian to the rock, and other things hidden deeper. There's a few different lore threads that people pull at. She could be a reference to Yao Bikuni, a nun who ate mermaid flesh and became immortal, started tricking people. We've seen Mibu Village people with similar plights. She could be from Senpo and an experimenter of the rejuvenating waters. Her whole get-up and movements mimic a no-play. In Japan, performers imitate ancient figures. She may well have been involved in luring and kidnapping victims to Senpo, or for messing with Mibu. We just don't know. Beating the monk just makes things weirder, as the place where the rock's kept has this weird straw giant sleeping above it. And there's like nothing in here besides this wedding shelter as well. Mibu Village, pretty cool area. Very Bloodborne type themes throughout. It's spooky, the people there are warped and hide in the ground like cicadas. There's monsters, there's ghosts. We're coming back here, but firstly, we need to get back to the castle. Now you'll notice after picking up both items, most of our warps are gone, and for good reason. When we return, it seems the castle's under attack. The red-hatted soldiers here are from the Interior Ministry. Now they've been spying on Ashina as a region for a while, and when we sent Genichiro packing, they've most likely chosen now to launch their assault. Luckily, they've put up little bridges to the castle so we can make our way up a lot easier, and you can see a lot of chaos going on with Ashina soldiers fighting Interior Ministry soldiers and so on and so forth. There's a few shinobi hunters here too, and the Tengu have been entirely wiped out and replaced by these. When we get to the top of the pagoda, we see an old friend and mentor of ours.
お主のことはよく覚えているぞ。死んだと聞いていたが、一体何を企んでいる？フクロウよ。
企むなど滅相。
He's talking about wanting to protect the divine heir, yet he rocks up just as the castle's under attack, and after essentially assassins are sent after us. Kuro's not buying it, and I think he's a smart kid. Now he gives us an ultimatum. Owl does. Follow the Iron Code and kill Kuro, or betray it and protect him. The father comes before the master, and one of the endings will proc if you choose to follow the code. But baby, I didn't forget that big ass katana from the flashback to Hirata. It's on. For disobeying the code, he tries to attack us, and so begins the fight with our father and mentor. He actually calls us Young Wolf instead of Starving Wolf for once, and it's a fairly easy fight as long as you dodge his little explosives. They'll stop your healing. His attacks are very well telegraphed, and something that's fun and I really should have got on camera is that if you try a thrusting attack on him, he'll use the Shinobi brand counter that we can learn to absolutely fuck us up. One thing I loved about this game was that for the most part, any martial enemy you can learn their attacks and styles just from practice and study of their esoteric text. Father Owl is a bit of a rough fight and a test of your skill, but with him taken out, we're told that one more ingredient of the incense burner is missing, a divine tree blossom. Owl actually had a dead blossom on him, but what if we could go back to when it was alive? If you've been a good shinobi and eavesdropped on Emma enough, you'll eventually hear her talking to the sculptor about another Buddha chime. She fears giving us the bell as it will get us closer to severing the divine immortality, and she understands that as part of the ritual, it's either we die or Kuro dies, and she doesn't want either of us gone. We go through a condensed form of the estate, one from where we had allegedly died. The enemies here are a lot stronger, and we have a bit of a redux of the inner estate section, and the fight against Juzo himself. I'm glossing over this, as what we actually need is hidden under the Temple of the Estate. We're using a bell that was on Owl's person, and I think we're inside Owl's memories. So we end up fighting Owl again. This time he's slightly younger and a bit more powerful. There's a few new attacks, so it's a bit different to the previous fight. I think it's unfair to call it a copy-paste. He even has some fun illusion attacks and the shadow dash that we can learn to do, and you can do the spear counter on that as well. It's quite nice. If we use the prosthetic this time, Owl's not seen it on us yet and hints at knowing the sculptor. He says he's seen that tool before. Similar things happen if we resurrect. If you blast through the fight, it's much longer and harder this time, and eventually we do beat him. He's actually quite proud of us for it, and we managed to get a branch of the Everblossom with all of its leaves intact. Now I found Hirata 2 a little bit lacking, but the fight against Owl sure made it up for me. Head back to the castle, put all the ingredients in a pot, sprinkle the Lord's divine blood on it, and we can cover ourselves in the aroma. It sounds really fucking gay when I recorded this right now. With this, we can head to Fountainhead Palace, an area adjacent to the Divine Realm. We have to head back to the area we found the rock in, enter the palanquin, and something very strange happens indeed. The whole supernatural straw guardian thing is made of this rope you'll find marking sacred places in Japanese folklore. So, the more rope tends to mean, more sacred. So, with this thing carrying us, it's clear we're not in Kansas anymore. And we're somewhere very sacred indeed, or heading somewhere very sacred indeed. Before we can get to all the fun, we come to a bridge with the actual monk on it, not an illusion this time. And the entrance is pretty swaggy. The fight plays out similar, but quite different. The monk itself has some illusion powers, so in its second phase it shows this full frontal by sending shadow clones to jump up at us. If you jump into the trees, you can actually get a sneaky backstab off and just wipe her straight into her third phase. Now the third phase, they have this centipede sticking out of their head, which actually makes the fight easier as they try and do this cone attack on you, but you can just walk around it for the most part. The whole centipede thing leans into the Senpo, experimenting with rejuvenating water stuff and the whole she's infested. Across the bridge, things get really nutty where there's this whole set of houses floating upon the waters at the top of the peak. I imagine the source of the rejuvenating waters is at the peak. It's also full of these mist nobles who can do this ranged stun on you if they see you, and they try and suck your youth out of you, which again, sounds really fucking gay when I'm recording it. The guards of this place are also very divine looking with this blue skin and ability to float around. We've pierced somewhere near to heaven, and we're sneaking through it. All these Sekiro blossoms are in the air, there's a few secrety bits dotted around here from noblemen in pots to a giant divine version of the burning ball, but I'm glossing over these because, if you remember, we came here to find a dragon, and I want to leave enough for you guys to explore. Cross through the houses, we encounter a bridge, and there's a bit of a running around as there's areas we have to navigate in a very vertical manner to try and get deeper towards the top of the mountain. There's even a fun mini-boss who we can throw lightning at. And we actually need to dive into the waters protected by the Divine Carp to advance, and this thing's huge. We're expected to hide from it as we swim, get through the water, climb past more Sekiros, and we can find our way to the Dragon Shrine. The Fountainhead Palace as an area has a very magical feel to it, and I liked it as much as I did rush through it. Fountainhead Palace isn't truly the Divine Realm, it's at the foot of it. The Dragon Shrine can take us to the Divine Realm, in a similar fashion to when we saw the folding panel monkeys. Because we're so close to the entrance, we have all this magical divine shit, but we're still in a tangible place in the Ashina mountainside. If you had planes, you could drop squad into this place. That's until we pray to the dragon. We arrive literally above the cloud line. We are somewhere completely divine at this point, or we're stuck in our own mind. Hard to tell. We fight through the old dragons of the tree, and there's a ton of lore to dump. The immortality of the divine air carries with it a disease called the dragon rot that can affect NPCs if we die too much. It's curable using Sekiro droplets, but these old dragons reflect this rot as they're decayed wooden versions of the real thing. The actual divine dragon is called the Dragon of the Sakura in the Japanese original text. Sakura became the national flower of Japan during the Heian period. Before then it was the plum blossom, suggesting the dragon itself isn't as old as Japan and the other divine creatures, or more that it's new to the pantheon here in Sekiro's world. The dragon came after the gods, and with it brought its immortality, its artificial immortality, to the chosen bloodline. This immortality, and in fact all forms that we see in the game, are not natural, as we've seen by both the experimentation of man, The fact Owl and Ashina are both seeking the divine air now as if it's some new discovery. The dragon's blood, the rejuvenating waters, they're all corruptive in nature, hence why Lord Kuro wants to restore balance and end things. Now the fight with the dragon's very gimmicky. You just have to keep ploughing forward until you can hit various lightning strikes and throw the lightning back at the dragon. When we get close enough, we cut into its tear ducts to harvest the divine tears, and we're not actually killing the creature. It's probably fully possible we're incapable. Maybe we wouldn't even want to, but regardless, with the divine tears, we can head back to Ashina Castle. We're teleported there, and I imagine to where the bloodline rests. Kuro has fled the castle through the back passage, and he's escaped to the little flowery field we saw at the beginning of the game. He's running from central forces. With the tears, we can sever the immortality plaguing the land, and maybe even stop the rejuvenating waters as well if the dragon turns out to be the source. I don't know, pure speculation, but regardless, we're entering the finale. When the finale kicks off, Central have begun a full-scale invasion of the Ashina lands. Not just the castle, but the surrounding areas too, and a lot of our warp points are completely gone. If we travel down from the castle back into the Ashina outskirts, away from where we're meant to be going essentially, we can see this full invasion force. Now there's a ton of optional Redguard fights and a lot of siege equipment dotted around. If we head back to where we fought the horse riding boss earlier, we can see one of our missing friends. The sculptor's turned into Ashura, a god of the battlefield, consumed by his immense rage and hatred. We can turn into one of these in a previous ending, and this fight is no joke. He's like the Manus of this game. And we get various hints towards this being the sculptor, from a secret dialogue line if we give him enough sake, to the Afuda paper covering his hut as a form of exorcism. All of the Buddhas he carves are warped by hatred, and when the land comes under attack, he's called to war. The actual grappling hook from his little hut is burnt as well to show, he turned there. The sculptor has a sad fate indeed. There's various item descriptions that hint that during his shinobi days, he was known as the orangutan, and he had a partner who was killed by the guardian ape. With her death came his downward spiral. Let's just ignore this demon for now, but I thought it was good to just show you that it's here, and head back to the real finale. Kuro's at the secret passage, and it's just about as easy to get to as it was in the intro. We run through to that blooming field as we did in the start. Genichiro has come back with what appears to be a second mortal blade. He's been busy while we've also been questing, and his shows similar capabilities with the same sweeping attack that we can do, and its ability to cut Lord Kuro. He's fully lent into this turning to heretical techniques to protect his land angle, and you can't really blame him with the state Ashina's in right now. His fight's almost identical to the one atop the castle, except when we take him down to 0 health, he shows us the true capabilities of his mortal blade.
わしはこのアシナをよみがえらせねばならぬ。ゆえに赤炉、お主を切るぞ。
He uses his blade to open a gate to the underworld and pull the Sword Saint Ishin out of it. The old dude we saw the corpse of upstairs in the castle, the man in the prologue cutscene. It's not clear where he got this mortal blade from, but that's its big gimmick. It can open gates to the underworld. We now have to fight the master of the Ashina technique, and he's got 3 health bars on top of the 2 we just took out of his grandson. It's a really testing fight, easier than some if you've mastered the combat system. Ishin fights fair throughout, and it's a battle of good swordsmanship. As you take him into his various phases, he ends up pulling out a spear and a matchbook pistol. Ishin has this nonchalant attitude throughout. He seems to not really approve of his grandson's actions, as he didn't in his living days either. But as a sword saint, he respects a good fight and an honourable combat. He's probably just happy to find a worthy opponent in Sekiro. Earlier in the game, he used the line, "Hesitation is defeat," and if he beats us, he'll repeat that again. His final phase has him using the lightning of Tomoe against us, and if he beat Ishin, he'll assume a kneeling position, awaiting his honourable execution. He doesn't seek to trick us like Owl does, he acknowledges his loss, and congratulates us as he returns to the underworld. With Ishin gone, we can go to Kuro's side and begin the rite to sever the resurrective power of the dragon's blood. With Kuro freed of his curse, we wish him to live on as we condemn the last immortal ourselves, and behead ourselves with the mortal blade. Sakura leaves fly from the wound, and in the final scene, Kuro's seen praying with Emma at our grave as he leaves to continue his mortal life. I think this ending does wrap things up well, and as said before, there's a couple of others sneaking around in there, but the final fight is spectacular and a real capstone to a great game. So with the last immortal condemned, what did I think? I think this game's a solid 7 out of 10. There's a few things to break down. The story's top notch and probably the best narrative out of FromSoft's catalogue. It's accessible, you can relate to parts of it, and the plot as a whole with its many endings and alternate final bosses is really enjoyable. I like a good anime, I like a good samurai flick, and this scratched that itch. Plus, some of the areas of Japanese mythology and the Asian supernatural in general, as a whole, aren't really touched on in other games. And that was a super big bonus for me. The combat, I think, is the most responsive sword system I've seen. It felt like playing an analogue Metal Gear Rising, and I loved how you had options with stealth or some of the shinobi weapons, but really, you always ended up needing just your skill to get through. It was rare an enemy felt cheap, and combat is very engaging, regardless of the foe. Level design's quite cool, with a few really unique areas, including Ashina Castle, Mibu Village, and the whole Fountainhead area, though I did feel, due to the way the combat is and your ability to zip around with your grappling hook, you don't get as intimate with these areas as you do in other FromSoft titles. A lot of them I found myself zipping through because there's nothing to collect that has much of an impact on the gameplay. You kill bosses for attack power, mini bosses and the odd collectible prayer bead for your health, but really the other consumables don't do too much for you. Some of them have some nice effects, but you don't really need them. So the level design is all a bit overshadowed by how fast you can move through it, and how fast you're almost encouraged to move through it. It's a shame as there's some really cool spots too. There's a few palette swap fights when it comes to mini bosses, and a couple of big boss fights that also let the game down doing that. Some of the returning through areas was offset by how fast you could cut through them, and by how much they changed the areas around a second pass, so I didn't mind that too much. Overall, it's such a fun gaming experience. There's quite a steep learning curve, but once it gets you hooked, it really does get you hooked. It's $49.90 at the moment, and I'd still probably wait for it to go on sale before getting it, but it was definitely worth that once upon a time. Yeah, over and out, Smooth Brains.
Fraggle! Ah! Somebody help